If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe, follow, and rate on your preferred podcast platforms. If you'd like to reach out to me, simply connect to me on Twitter. Links in the description.
Ever expanding because of Netflix and what Disney is doing now, because everyone has more and more complex stories that they want to tell, and the tech allows us to do it now very easily. So it's changing quite a bit. With regards to like Star Wars going back into model making, we actually at our studio we did a couple of the Star Wars movies, so we got introduced to like some of the stuff they were doing on set, and it's amazing. Like using puppet work and things like that, it's awesome. And there's so many related industries, so many actors that go into sort of filmmaking and eventually end up become puppet makers instead. So they actually make live puppets and they try to perform the way the puppet should perform, which is so cool. And the Mandalorian had Baby Yoda, who was completely animated that way. So it's quite interesting that even though technology allows you to do a lot of these incredible things, you kind of go back into what is artistically fun.
This is Madhav Shyam. He is an Emmy Award winning visual effects artist and a filmmaker who has worked on award winning series and films like Star Trek, Star Wars, The Dragon Prince, to name a few. He specializes in rigging and animation, which, along with many other aspects of filmmaking, brings fictional characters to life on screen. In this episode, we talk about visual effects and cinema and how the film industry is evolving with technology. Here's my conversation with Madhav Shyam. It's amazing that we have technology and artists who can create fictional characters and bring them to life on screen. I think some great examples are, The Lion King, Wall-E, Avatar, and Star Wars, which I personally really enjoy. Uh, and these are great examples of what visual effects and animation can bring, and storytelling in general. So to start off, I want to know what fascinates you about film and animation. Is it about communicating stories and entertaining the audience, or is it about bringing these characters to life? Uh, so yeah, what makes film and visual effects fun and exciting for you? And when did you realize you wanted to do this?
Yeah, it's a really interesting and exciting industry, and I think a good way to answer that would be to describe like sort of how I started. So when I was in high school, my mom at the time she was working for this Hollywood production company called Deluxe, and they used to in the company they had this sort of system where any film or TV show they would make, they would let you essentially take DVDs home and watch the movies that they were making. And then that's sort of the first time when I saw the first Transformers movie. And I thought this was something so cool because this is something that us as kids we grew up with watching, and we played with the toys, and we tried to sketch them out, and and we loved all of that stuff. And the fact that you can make that in film and you can make that as a source of entertainment for people, it was so exciting and so interesting for me. So between seeing that movie and I think the Iron Man film, which came out in 2008, so I was in the eighth grade then, I was pretty much convinced because of those two that this is something that I want to do. This looked interesting, this looked fun. And before that, I don't think I'd ever found something that I was that passionate about. So for me, it was those two things, just bringing all the memories from my childhood and being able to create that on my end. That was really cool. And of course, like Star Wars, and I'm a huge fan of this movie called Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. It was a really inspiring movie for me when I was a kid because it sort of transported me into a very different world, and sort of showed me like how amazing filmmaking can be, especially for like children. So when I was really young when I watched that movie, and so yeah, those things really inspired me to sort of go into this industry and try to create those events that molded my youth.
Uh, did you have Were you following any hobbies, or were you practicing something that also helped you choose this, like model making or drawing? Were you doing something that also helped you later on?
Yeah, I did. Like I used to always sketch since I was a kid. And that, like, if I go to my high school books, I have like these accounts books that I used to keep from my 11th and 12th grade. And if you go into them, there's like, like 30% of the book is like important notes, and then 70% of the book is sketches. So I used to sketch all the time, and I'm a bit of a daydreamer. So between sketching and like daydreaming, like my psyche was sort of, I think, really designed to do something like this. So I did have a background all my life, which would sort of help me in what I'm doing now. I just didn't know at the time what was going on. But yeah, definitely sketching. I sketched all my life, and I love storytelling as well. So yeah, definitely.
And how much of that is, part of your work, daily work today? Sketching, for example.
I actually work now more on the technology side of things, but it's really not the thing is that my particular job sort of lies between the really technology driven side and the really creative side. So I act as sort of a bridge between these two. So for me, it's super useful to to sort of have passion for the creative side, so the artistic side, because I need to be able to talk to very artistic people and have intelligent conversations and be able to understand them, because whatever they create, that's the stuff that you see on the screen in the end. And so I need to be able to understand like what they care about, what they're passionate about, and bring some of my interests into it, and then find a way to let the technology sort of help it. So being able to be creative yourself is super useful, because that's the only way you can connect with the other creatives.
So is there a problem, or is there challenges when going from sketches to actually producing computer or CGI content? Can How difficult is to take something from uh, a story or a character's personality and put it on screen? You talked about technology, so uh, what are the challenges that you face during that process?
I think a lot of it is to do with what technology is available to you and what your skill set is at. So the example I like to take is, even though I might enjoy drawing and sketching, like since I was really young, there are a lot of people out there who are considerably better than me. Now, when I imagine something in my head, I can think of what a picture should be. But then when I draw it myself, it doesn't look quite like the same as what I'm imagining it. And this is something that everyone has. Everyone knows what they want it to look like, but their hand is unfortunately not skilled enough to be able to do that. And that's the same thing for film, where I think when you have good creatives with you, you always have an amazing project in your mind. But to get it there, it's just about understanding the technology that's there, what the limitations are, what the budget is, and then finding a way to do that. And because of that, the best artists that are there in the filmmaking industry are ones essentially who are constantly working on something different, something professional, something private, indie stuff, short films, feature films, everything, because they're constantly trying to improve their skill set to be able to bring to light like what the director and the storyteller wants to say.
Uh, yeah, you mentioned Transformers and Iron Man as the first few inspiration early on, and I remember having a similar phase and looking at tutorials on YouTube and trying to recreate these effects with very limited equipment, which was very exciting. And yeah, so how did you go about learning this? You mentioned how you were always trying out and experimenting by yourself. So when did you turn that into you know uh, an education, and how did you go about that? Can you talk about the training aspect and the schools and the kind of programs that are available?
Yeah. So I sort of had a similar start to what you were saying, which is it was honestly just going to the internet and figuring out like what people were doing in like After Effects and in Maya and all these like crazy softwares, and trying to replicate what they were doing and trying to see if you can make it yourself. And I think a lot of filmmakers have the same start. They were just trying stuff as a hobby on their own, and then realized that they could make a professional living out of it. For me, what I ended up doing in terms of my education is I ended up doing a distance degree because my mom was very adamant on the fact that I needed a degree before I go into this. So I have something to fall back on. She wasn't sure if I could make it. So I did a distance degree. I did a BA, and then I took a course along at the same time in one of the animation institutes in Bangalore called MAC, and they had this one institute in Koramangala, and I was studying over there, and that was really great because I had access to a lot of really trained teachers to teach you the basics. So there's that, like you kind of get, if you like watch a tutorial online, you only getting like what the person dictating the tutorial wants you to know. You can't really ask too many questions. There's a bit of an information gap there, so you're kind of limited to what they know, and you might replicate the mistakes that they have made because you don't know any better and you don't have a way to communicate. So going to an actual school, and just like having trained teachers with you to ask them questions and to try different things out with them, that really helped me out. So I sort of did my BA on the side, and then I got like two diplomas during my 3-year period after high school, and then I finished that. And then by the time I complete, I think like 2 years into it, I sort of knew that within the schools that I was going to in India, there was a limit to how much information I could get there. And then I realized that I kind of need to move out and just go to some place where film is big, where you have the best people around you. So I was very fortunate enough to be able to go to Vancouver and then go to a really good school there called the Vancouver Institute of Media Arts, and study over there for a year. So I had like really like the best people in filmmaking there. I had instructors who were essentially making big movies, coming in the evening and talking to us while they were doing the production. So that also helped me through. So between having that, having really trained artists both back home and in Canada, like come in and train me, and then also having the information that the internet allowed, sort of that really helped train me. And I just kept doing courses on the side to pick up skills I didn't have. For example, like in the technology side of what I do requires you to know, let's say, programming, and requires you to know, engineering and things like that. And those are not things that were from my background. I didn't do a degree in that. So, it meant doing a workshop in Python, learning Python that way, and then started to applying that, or do the same for like C++, right? So yeah, it's a bit of there's no. I wish there was more of a structured path, but the industry doesn't allow for a really structured path because it's very organic and it keeps changing. So that means that you kind of have to do a few different things and then do your own research and start picking up programs and certificates from here and there, and then you sort of like mold yourself into a very technical and creative artist. And it's the same thing for the artistic side as well. You're gonna have to go do courses to actually learn how to do these things.
Uh, do you think it's easier now, with the online courses and interactions? I think, is it really necessary, or when would someone have to go to a school, considering what we have today with online education?
I think a combination of the two makes for the best result. I think what the school allows you to do is sort of have a structured way of growing. So you have essentially things every semester that you learn and you acquire, knowledge that you acquire. So I think that structure really helps. And so I always tell people doing a degree in this is actually really great, even though it's not necessary, because I think it gives you a longer period of time where you learn from a lot of different departments and learn stuff that maybe you didn't want to learn, but you should have learned. But the thing that the online courses do is it gives you access to people that you don't have access to. So if I'm doing a course, let's say like I did, if I was doing a course back home in India, I have only access to the Indian talent that's available in that city in that moment, right? But the internet basically gives you access to all these people. There are tons of master classes out there. You have, like in music, for example, Hans Zimmer has a master class. Imagine learning from Hans
Yeah.
Zimmer directly. So it allows you access to all these people and their information. So I would say do both. Bring structure into your life, be able to control what you're learning, but then use the internet to its benefits, which is having access to all these people. And once you have that, then you can really grow and yeah, do your thing.
Have you thought about teaching yourself? Maybe online or uh, some other media.
Yeah, I have. I think I would like to do it. The thing is, there usually aren't a lot of students for what I want to do. Um, it's a very like niche job within a very niche industry in some ways. Um, but I would love to do it at some point. I did work as a TA briefly in film school after graduating, which was a fun experience. And when we have like junior artists come into work, I do spend a lot of time training them. So teaching would be really fun. But I think I would like to be at a position where I'm a bit more experienced. I think I think this period of my life, I just want to actually push myself and see how much I can learn. And then after that, yeah, it would be like amazing to actually sit down and teach people, and it would be really cool. I would love to do that in the future.
That's nice. One of the first movies I think I remember watching or going to was the Titanic, and I think if I'm not wrong, I think it involves physical models and green screen, like the early Star Wars movies. So being a 90s kid and now having worked for several years, how do you think the space has changed? How do you think the whole visual effects space has changed? The technology, as we have computers that can do a lot of computation today, but we also see with I think the last Star Wars movie where they went back to model making uh, and trying to bring out some of those features. So what has changed in this industry, or what have you noticed?
I think the technology has changed like crazy. Like if you're talking about Star Wars, it's made in like 1968. I think it was released, the first one. So it's a long time ago. My mom was just born uh in that year, so it's a very long time ago. And to yeah, the technology has improved like crazy since then. Like AI and machine learning has taken over a lot, so we see a lot more like stuff with deep fakes and facial performance capture and things like that. So there's that. And then there's with the latest Mandalorian TV show, they introduced the LED panel system. So back in the day, you'd use a green screen to replace basically everything that's on the green area into a different background, right? So now with the LED panels, they can put the panel there and introduce the background while you're shooting it. So the entire process gets more organic because you're actually shooting all the film grain and things like that live. So there's a lot of new stuff that's going on there, and this crazy new software. So I think it's really blown up, and it's ever expanding because of Netflix and what Disney is doing now, because everyone has more and more complex stories that they want to tell, and the tech allows us to do it now very easily. So it's changing quite a bit. With regards to like Star Wars going back into model making, we actually at our studio we did a couple of the Star Wars movies, so we got introduced to like some of the stuff they were doing on set,
That's
and it's
cool.
amazing, like using puppet work and things like that. It's awesome. And there's so many related industries, so many actors that go into sort of filmmaking and eventually end up become puppet makers instead. So they actually make live puppets and they try to perform the way the puppet should perform, which is so cool. And the Mandalorian had Baby Yoda, who was completely animated that way. So it's quite interesting that even though technology allows you to do a lot of these incredible things, you kind of go back into what is artistically fun. And the way I like to think about that is like when it comes to music, there's incredible ways to produce music now with synthesizers and with these crazy mixers, and you can really go hardcore electronic and like rely on your hardware like the whole way through, or you can actually like be super organic about it and make it from the ground up. And people have tastes, right? So people don't want to see something that's super synthetic. They want to actually build stuff. And when you take the Blade Runner movie, they actually built the sets for it, like miniature sets, and they would take your camera running through these sets. So I think it's amazing the fact that they have the ability to do all these amazing things, but they still want to go back to the artistry and make it because that's what makes it fun and what makes it feel organic and real. And you don't want something that's super computer based, because it kind of honestly gets a little bit boring when you do that.
Uh, so does this also, affect the production timing, and how does that work for a typical movie? Considering like you mentioned, the traditional way and the the computer or the computational way.
Yeah, I think I mean, the thing is, because the way the client might want to approach the project might be different on different ones, it puts interesting challenges to it. Because they might want to do something that forces us to change the way we address our pipeline. So we have a structured pipeline that allows us to get all the stuff inputted from them and then deliver all the additional post-production stuff they want out of it. So that sort of changes from project to project. So usually how they go about it is we have a project supervisor or visual effects supervisor from our end, along with a producer from our company, speak to our client and figure out exactly what they plan to do and how they plan to go about their production, and then sort of dictate how we could possibly do it. So then the supervisor and the producer from our side contact all the department heads on our end and figure out, hey, what the time might be like, what the challenges might be like, and then we build like sort of a structured schedule on how we could possibly do it. But to answer your question, it's honestly, it goes from project to project. So based on what the client wants to do. So some clients might be super invested. So we have clients who are like super invested on making everything in computers. That means there's a lot more work on our table. Whereas there might be other projects where they have done a lot of work on set and we just need to sort of emphasize it a bit more and just add a few things here and there. And that sort of, yeah, dictates like how our production plan would be.
You recently won an Emmy for the Dragon Prince animated series, which is pretty cool. So, first of all, congratulations. How does it feel, and when did you find out about it, and what was your first reaction?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it was honestly amazing. It's the I have the accolade like right above me. I have it on my wall. I think it was really awesome. I think it was a good project. Honestly, that's if I'm, a lot of artists work in my industry, and there's a lot of people who work in an industry, and a lot of them haven't gotten these accolades, and they deserve it far more than I do. Because I'm relatively young, and I got a chance to work on a really cool project, and that allowed me to get it. And there's a lot of other people who are far more deserving of it than I am. But it does feel amazing, and it is, filmmaking and doing the stuff that I do is something that's really hard to do because not many people want to invest in it, and there's always sort of a risk involved in it because it's not a structured career in a way. So it feels really great when you get a recognition for achieving something while taking that risk. So I'm really proud of it. Um, and I'm really proud of what they managed to do in that show, and I can't wait to get more. I really want more of that kind of stuff because I think to be part. I mean, personally for me, there are a lot of projects other than that one where I think there was a lot more of my work involved, and I'm more proud of those for those reasons. But projects like these are recognizable by people, and it's like you said, it's an Emmy for a children's animated series, so a lot of kids really loved it. A few years ago, when I spoke to a bunch of like middle school kids about like how they could have a possible career in like filmmaking and in animation and things like that, I mentioned this other show I worked on called Monster High. And when I mentioned that, all these like 12, 13-year-old girls went like crazy because I was just, in the post-production side of it or the production side of it. And I was just making it to the best of my abilities, but I didn't know what it meant to these kids. And for them, like, it was a big deal that I worked on it, and they had questions about that one. And I had like all these other Hollywood films that I put up, but they didn't care about any of those. They wanted to know about that show. So for me, yeah, it feels amazing to get the recognition, but I think I'm really excited about the fact that um, just as those other films like affected me when I was younger, these things affect people,
Yeah.
young people that are coming up, and they care, and they're excited about it. They want to talk to you about it. So I think that's the really cool thing for me.
I guess it must be really exciting, when you see people who watch your films, and you can talk about it from a perspective of the creator. It's must be a great feeling. But what were you responsible for in the Dragon Prince? If you can talk about it.
So my job is so I do something called rigging, and what it essentially is that when you have let's say in a cartoon, you have a bunch of different types of characters that are designed by very talented people, very artistic people, and then they make 3D models out of these designs in our 3D applications. And after that, they have to basically have a way to move. So I design a system within those applications to allow them to move. So it's a weirdly sort of creative but technical job where you're kind of dealing with a software that might be very mathematical and very limited in what it can do. But at the same time, you have very creative people dictating you, telling you, "Hey, I don't like that shape. That needs to look like this. This needs to perform like that." And I have to find a way to essentially teach the computer how to understand what they're saying and sort of find a way to make it move in a realistic and organic way. And with something like the Dragon Prince, which is a cartoon, it's a lot more extremes because the poses, the shapes, the expressions are very artistically driven. And in a two-dimensional animation, like if you do like hand-drawn animation or through any sort of like a drawn method of it, you can reach those extremes very easily because all you have to do is draw the extreme. But to tell a computer to basically do that is kind of a unique challenge. So yeah, it was a tough show to work on because of that.
Yeah, you mentioned software. Uh, I remember, I think in the early or in the late 2000s, I think tracking was one problem where if you didn't have really good footage, you had to maybe manually track the source video. But I'm assuming today we have. I mean, even your phone can track real time in some applications. So, with respect to that, how much of how difficult would it be working in, say, late 2000s as opposed to 2020?
Yeah, I mean, we get spoiled. I can see that honestly with people I sometimes work with as well, because they complain about things that they should be really thankful that we have like better technology now that that can actually get them quite far quite quickly. Yeah, if you go back in time, I mean, it's the same as like a couple of years ago, I was visiting some of my family in the States, and then my uncle and I, we were driving around, and then we sort of got lost. And then I had to sort of use Google Maps. Like I was having an argument with him on like where we should go, and I was using Google Maps. It's like, the maps was telling you should go this way. And then he was sort of telling me that you guys are he's sort of, I think, his late 60s 70s now, and he was telling me that you guys are useless without your phone. And which is true because like I mean, if you've lived in Sweden, I'm living in Denmark. The fact that you have Google Translate to go in to
Yeah,
translate every product that's there on the shelf to figure out what you need to make for dinner tonight is an amazing piece of tech. And you take that away, and then you put yourself in the same situation, you would struggle a lot, right?
yeah,
So I
definitely.
think that's the same thing with filmmaking as well, where the tech has come so far, but if you did take it away, you would have a really hard time adjusting to it. But at the same time, I mean, if you do, like, we used to have a lot of history classes in film school, so we got to learn about all these really amazing artists like Rick Baker and Neville Page, and these like fantastic people who made films and made creatures and monsters in a time where the technology we have now wasn't available to them. So that there's always another way to go about it. And filmmaking, honestly, especially on the visual effects side of things, is always just finding a way to do it. So we have the story, we need to find a way to tell that story. So we'll always like invent new things. So if you take the technology away, I'm sure we'll find some new ones.
You mentioned Netflix and Disney earlier. Yeah, so we have services today that we can watch movies and shows on our phones. uh, and now with the pandemic, we have no choice. The cinemas are maybe closed in your country. uh, so do you see this as a permanent, or do you think this would be part of life, several decades from now? uh, have you thought about how these streaming platforms, can evolve and, maybe challenge the cinema experience?
Yeah, I think virtual reality is the big one right now that's kind of putting people in a space where they can really have immersive experiences on their own. But the for me the thing is, storytelling essentially is for me sort of like, social thing. I don't know what word to use actually. It's sort of, it's a communal thing. You
Yeah.
actually want to sit around the fire and hear the story being told, right? So when you watch a film, I feel personally that that's what I want as well. I want to actually sit with other people, experience it together, the sad moments, the happy moments, and and feel the energy that goes off of each other. And I think that's what makes the best experiences. But at the same time, we've all been in that situation where the person sitting next to us in the theater is really ruining our experience because
Yeah.
of how loud they may be eating their popcorn, or the fact that they're asking 50 questions. So that way streaming is really great because you can experience something that you want to just on your own. So I think the technology and everything that COVID has sort of created for us, sort of has allowed for this environment where you can choose to do that if you want. But I think we need to realize that fundamentally, all of these things, even though we want to sort of like put headphones into our ears and listen to music or listen to a podcast or watch a movie on our own, fundamentally, these experiences we want to have with each other,
Yeah.
not just with ourselves. So I think the tech allows for us to do a lot of things, but I think culture has to introduce the importance of actually experiencing it with each other. So maybe we're going to have a Netflix theater or a Disney theater
Yeah.
where they have all the shows that you can watch it on like on your laptop or on your smartphone or whatever. And there's also a theater that's gonna say, hey, the latest episode of Game of Thrones is coming out in this theater on this date. So if you want to go and sit with all the other Game of Thrones nerds and watch it and experience it with them, you can go to this park or this theater and go do that. And that sounds awesome to me. So you can have a little bit of both.
Yeah, imagine having the ability to watch with the cast, remotely through a VR experience. I think not everybody gets to be part of the premiere show or whatever that's called. That happens now exclusively. So I think something like that would be really fun and unique. Uh, yeah, and you mentioned VR. So and with phones, becoming faster every year, is there a potential for innovation with respect to how uh, the cinema experience can change uh, with respect to the participation of not just being a spectator in the story, but participating? Can VR help in that?
Yeah, I think it can. I mean, in terms of interactive storytelling, that's been sort of going around for a bit now. I know, what was that show? Black Mirror. They had an interactive
Yep,
episode that came out at some
I
point,
think it's the
and there are other
Bandersnatch.
shows as well that are trying to do interactive episodes. I know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so there's a lot of people who are trying to create that. I even yeah, I've seen a lot of places where they're trying to do that kind of stuff, and it's really interesting. And if you can introduce virtual reality to it, that would be amazing. Virtual reality right now has certain technological limitations, and we're trying to kind of overcome those. But in the near future, I can see it becoming a big thing. It's a fun way to experience a story, but one of the things I was told, like from a director who sort of specializes in virtual reality, is you want to give the participant the ability to sort of alter the story, but you want to actually give them a guiding element, right? So they actually follow the path as much as possible, maybe make a few exceptions here and there, but for the most part, they need to try and follow the path because the whole point of it is to tell a story and make you feel like you're part of it. But then if you're constantly fighting yourself against that story, you're gonna not have a great experience. So the challenge with VR is essentially that, like, VR storytelling is how do you put sort of a storyline in there, and how do you make the person sort of stick on that storyline, but still feel like they have an ability to manipulate some of the environment as they're doing it.
Yeah, it sounds like a middle ground between video games and cinema. Uh, but I think that would
Yep.
be really fun. The Bandersnatch was a good attempt, I would say. But I think, I mean, we don't know what participation in a cinema can be yet. So, yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Are you excited for any other cinema or theater technology, apart from what can help you produce these movies and animations? Uh, are you looking forward to technologies in the cinema, for example, better resolution, projection, or the surround system? Is there anything in that space that you're looking forward to?
Honestly, I'm not like super. I can't think of anything I'm super excited about. I like the fact that technology becoming more financially accessible to people. So I think that's the thing that excites me the most, because there's a lot of indie filmmakers who have really amazing stories to tell, and the fact that the tech nowadays allows them to tell those stories, I think that's really great. I'm hoping that platforms like Vimeo and Disney allow for short films to sort of come in and sort of have their sort of dominance there, because there's a lot of interesting short films that are being made that you kind of miss out on because they're sort of stuck in some Vimeo page somewhere, and only super interested people in film sort of get to know about it, and that's a shame. So I would love for the tech to allow for independent filmmakers to do more stuff and then be able to hear their stories. Right now, the big studios like Marvel and Disney and you know all those guys, they sort of dominate the space. And so when you go to Netflix, for example, you're sort of seeing the Netflix originals and the next big movie that comes in. So it'd be great to sort of have like tech to allow like for sort of a small space for indie filmmakers to put in their stuff and just be like, oh, let's check out this short film, because they have some really interesting stuff. So I'm excited about the fact that they might be able to do that.
Uh, Going back to VR, is VR being implemented in production, or in filming? Because I remember seeing videos where the entire CGI environment was brought into a live screen at the set, just to picture how the characters or the actors would be in place. So, uh, do you know about VR in production? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I can't talk a lot from personal experience because I don't have enough of it, but a lot of the big studios in Hollywood are doing it now. So VR production is a big deal. Lion King, the latest one, John Favreau, he sort of shot the entire thing almost in VR. So they had sort of these cameras they could manipulate with the game engine, and they could dictate like how the camera should move through the scene, and the camera operator could have control of that, sort of an organic active sort of hardware handle that they could move around, and it would move the camera and the engine, the game engine, and that was really cool. It creates new work in different places because of that, because a lot of times in post production, as the name states, the work comes after the production. So all the camera animation is already dictated. What the actors are supposed to do is dictated, and we just sort of add our elements on top of it. Now it's sort of, because of VR, it's sort of blending it into production. So when you take the Mandalorian, because they have this sort of LED stage, and they're sort of shooting the actors on this LED stage. Now a lot of the post production work happens in pre production, and it's sort of blending in now. So the studios are working with it. It is a big deal. It's an amazing tool for directors to have. I think independent directors are doing it more now, because they don't have because studios sort of have to invest a lot of money and time with it. but independent artists can sort of just go in and buy a few pieces of tech, buy the HTC Vive and just toss it on and try some stuff. So it is going to be definitely part of filmmaking in the future. It's a really powerful tool, and the fact of like even with the latest, like if you take the latest iPhone, it's like live tracking everything around you.
Yeah.
So even a day to day, the every person basically has the ability to now start tracking surfaces around them and sort of like manipulate it and add stuff to it. And so yeah, I think yeah, it's going to be a big thing. It's already a big thing. It's going to become an even bigger thing in the future, and not just for filmmakers but for everyone.
Uh, More specifically to what you work on, animation and uh, modeling and rigging. What are some technologies there that are being developed and something and where innovation can happen?
Right now I think one of the big things that's happening in rigging is we have AI introduced applications. So facial performance capture has been a real challenge for a long time. So we have the uncanny valley. That's when something that's digitally human, when compared to something that's actually human, there's sort of a break in between how they look and how they perform. And so one looks super unrealistic and creepy and weird. And then when you compare it to a real human being, it looks organic, normal, and acceptable. And there's a lot of host of reasons why this happens. And so AI basically allows you to study a human being really in depth, and then lets the computer figure out all the missing elements, because our human beings are very complicated, and how we sort of we lie, and we do really complex emotions, and we're very trained to learn this from each other. Um, so that's been like sort of a bridge that's been really hard to cross, and I think AI is sort of helping with that, and there's a lot of companies dealing with that right now. So I know Digital Domain has their own AI performance capture application that they built, and they've been showing it off for a while now. That looks very exciting. With when it comes to tracking and things like that, that's also become a big thing, because you can essentially teach a machine to identify what a particular object is and try to track it and mask it. So being able to do that is pretty great, because human beings you often have to mask out an actor to be able to do something to them. Maybe it's just adjusting their skin tone, just like small little fixes. And the fact that you have to spend hours basically masking out hair and a person's skin is like super hard. So having a machine that able to identify what a human being is and what the background is, and be able to sort of mask it out quickly for us, that's amazing. So AI is, I would say, is a big thing.
uh, some parallels that I see, with what I do. For example, ensuring cars are safe on the roads involves, physics simulations. For example, a crash test, both in simulation and real life. So, how often do you work with realistic physical simulations in your animation, as opposed to, more abstract or uh, something that is support that does the job and looks as the way it is? And
Yeah, so I do a lot of simulation work. So we do a lot of tissue simulation work to make creatures look realistic in films, in feature films. So we do a lot of like muscle simulation and fat and skin tissue, and try to figure out an organic way to sort of make them all work together. But if I'm being completely honest, it's sort of semi-realistic. And the reason behind that is that in a film, very often you push these animations in an extreme where in real life it wouldn't be possible. One of the really good examples of that is when Weta Digital was making Avatar. There's this scene where one of the main characters, or the main character, was on top of this dragon, and the dragon does this cliff dive, and then they sort of like dive really deep into the ground, or sorry, into the sky, because these are floating surfaces. And when they ran the physical simulation on that, essentially the muscles and the tissue ripped off his body, because a
okay.
human being would never be able to handle that much g-force from diving at that extreme a speed. So creatively, the animation and the storytelling forces us to do things that are not realistic. It's not possible to do that for a human being or for an organic thing. So often we try to stick to it as real. We use these realistic simulation platforms to get it as close as possible. So we have Ziva Dynamics is like a great piece of technology that has come up in the last few years that's really helping out in tissue simulation. And Houdini has its own FEM solvers that are really useful for this kind of stuff, but it's not always realistic, and it's not as simple as building this system and just telling the computer make this animation work with it, because very often when you push the animation into a physically impossible circumstance, then the computer really doesn't know what to do, and then you're kind of editing on the go and trying to sort of make it work.
Yeah, a really inspiring example of this collaboration was, I think, with the Interstellar, where both the research and filmmaking came together and produced a great result. I'm sure anyone who's watched it really enjoyed it. So, yeah,
Yeah, it was beautiful, but I can definitely imagine them when they made the black hole. And then I can definitely imagine the director saying, "Hey, I think it could look a little bit better. So maybe we just put a little bit, or let's put a little bit of rim light over there. Let's just emphasize that a bit more." So I'm sure they made physically something probably that's really physically accurate, and then someone came in and said,
you
"Yeah, I
can't
think we
see
need to
it.
amp it. Yeah, I can't see it. I need to amp it up by like 50%." So yeah, it is amazing. It's amazing what you can do.
Uh, have you personally come across or used any machine learning based tools in your workflow? Say, motion tracking, or like for rendering purpose or something.
Deep fakes is something that I've tried working with. It's interesting. It has its limitation in terms of like the amount of source material you need to make the deepfake work, and also sort of the hardware that you need to make it work. So it's a really exciting piece of tech. I have very limited experience with it. I'm super optimistic I'll have more chances to do it in the future. I think it's really awesome. But yeah, I think deepfakes is the only thing that where I can actually say that I've actually done something with it.
You mentioned indie creators earlier, and yeah, today with all the tools we have, like you mentioned, just with an iPhone you can pretty much create very compelling visual effects in films. So is there any community based like film production that you're aware of? Because I know from the video gaming side, for example, Steam Workshop is a great way where community can contribute to an actual game. So is there something similar in film where people can contribute and participate in, say, a large budget film or by themselves? Is there a
I
platform, for
think
example?
I I honestly can't think of any, because usually with filmmaking, with the big studios, there's so many people that you normally have to go through. So most often directors don't necessarily get to do what they want to do, because they might have to go through some, higher ups that prevent them from doing that. So I think often, unfortunately, when I see directors or like creators, sort of changing the story based off of what people are saying, it's usually when like fans have a rant where they really don't like something that's being done on one of their favorite shows, and then they suddenly have to change a lot of things. I think that's also because of the fact that filmmaking often is a very personal experience. So the storyteller is trying to gather people around and tell you what the story is, right? You're often not asking people what their opinion of the story is,
Yeah.
because believe me, the internet has a lot of opinions. Who knew? So I think it sometimes doesn't create an environment to do that. Games, it does, because game in a video game, it's really open very often. And so the creators really want to know, in that open world, what do the players want to see? What do the players want to do? So that allows for that. Maybe in virtual reality productions, it might be more easier to do something like that, where you can have more participation from the the audience, and not just sort of work with just what the storyteller has to say. But I think in filmmaking, it's a little bit harder because you generally have a story already in mind that you want to say, and you don't want, you know, every other Joe out there just coming in and saying their opinion on what it should be. I personally get really frustrated with that because the whole point of storytelling is that you want to listen to what the person has to say, and then you get to judge for yourself if that's a story you want to listen to or not, right? But it's horrible when you let them say 50% of the story and then you tell them, no, I think you're wrong about that. I think you need to actually say it this way. Then it's just like, okay, listen to someone else then, you know? So I think that's the challenge with filmmaking because yeah, I don't think the environment would allow for people to be able to do that.
Yeah, the internet has a lot of opinions. I think the Game of Thrones got a lot of heat in the end, but like you mentioned,
Yep.
they had to stick to their stories.
Hmm.
Uh, so you mentioned video games. How different is the not just the education but the actual work when comparing with film and animation, and how easy is it for someone to switch between those two careers or workflow?
I think there's a lot of there's an area where it crosses over quite a bit. The technology is very similar, and as you know, like game engines are being more used in like productions and filmmaking now. So there's even more of a blending that's happening. But fundamentally, where game development and film development sort of changes is in game development, the user has the ability to move around and manipulate the environment. So essentially, the assets that they make for that environment has to be solid essentially in every angle and in every interaction, which is why game development is so much harder. And there's a lot more investment that goes into it. People don't realize how difficult it is to build these systems for the computer to be stable. Because you all, like, we've all seen these videos on YouTube of fails where the game engine sort of messes up and then you have like characters doing really weird things. And that's basically because something has happened in that world where the computer doesn't know what to do next, right? And artists and engineers have to work really hard to make sure those instances are as few as possible. They create really great memes for us,
Yeah.
but when it fails, but it's a really hard job to do.
Especially when
Whereas in
the game
film,
fails, it's pretty funny.
it's pretty hilarious. Yeah, it's got a guy all in a messed up pose. It's hilarious. And then it's when it comes to filmmaking, it's you can sort of lock things down more. Um, Even with virtual production, you can sort of really lock things down quite a bit. So you can focus on getting elements to work in the scene or for the shot. So, for example, if I have, in a Lion King movie, if there's like a herd of lions that are walking in a particular way, I just need to make sure that in the camera angle where it's coming at right now, it looks spot on and looks great. It might look really bad from some other angles, but I know that this camera is going to be fixed and it's going to work there. And so that means you can spend a lot more time detailing something. Whereas in a game, you're spending a lot more time detailing it in such a way that it stays stable and looks okay in all the camera angles. But in film, you just need to focus on that one. So you can introduce stuff like tissue simulation. You can introduce like really complex mathematical operations to get something to look super realistic because you have to only focus on one shot or
Yeah.
one angle. So fundamentally, there's where the difference comes in. So I think when a lot of artists who work in the game industry sort of come into film, maybe the challenge for them is to make something look super realistic because they haven't had to do that because they're focused on other things. And in filmmaking, when people sort of go the other way and they work at a gaming company, it might be a lot more challenging for them because they have to now, cover all sides and make sure that this thing is super stable and the engine can really handle it. And also the fact is in film, everything at the end gets baked down into a video sequence that someone sees on a monitor. But a game is largely dependent on the hardware that you have that's running the game. So they also have to now think about the
All
technology
the
that the
different types
person
of,
who's playing it,
yeah.
yeah, and how do you rest it down? So like from someone like me working in video games is it's a nightmare because I want to always do more. I want to more add more bells and whistles to the thing, and I'm always trying to do that, at my studio. But if I go into a game studio, they would be like, no, you need to bring that down by like 90%. You can use the last 10%, but that's about it. So it takes away 90% of my skills working there. So I think that's where the challenge on each side comes in.
Uh, Yeah, for the listeners, and if they're interested in pursuing a career in film and animation, uh, could you maybe simplify the different career paths, and the kind of skills they can pick up while they're studying there, in this primary school or high school, for example?
Mhm. I think with filmmaking, it's really good if you can do anything that's tech related and anything that's artistic. I think both those things really help. Personally, I wish I had done a better job in high school, and I did a horrible job in high school. So, and we had actually opportunities where I could have learned a lot of the stuff that I'm using now when I was younger, mostly in computer science and mathematics. It would have helped out a lot. But also all the artistic side, taking some of the artistic classes that we had when we were younger more seriously and really pursuing it and trying to do something incredible. And there's a bit of a cultural issue back home in terms of people pursuing those things. I've had the fortune of meeting some amazing engineers here, some really talented people who work at some of the biggest firms in the world, and a lot of them are incredibly artistically talented people. So they do the academic stuff too, but they're also incredible artists, incredible musicians, and you'd be amazed to realize that, oh, there's a human being that exists who had potential in both these things and sort of fell through the cracks back home because they had to focus on one more than the other. So I would say invest time in both things. That's going to really help you. And shooting very early on in your life is really great. So making little films early on in your life is really great. One of my flatmates, he's a film director as well, and he's a good friend of mine, and he's shown me stuff that he made when he was a kid, and it's fantastic. I would have loved to have spent time with him when I was a kid because it's fantastic having someone make a little movie, put on some weird costumes, and do something crazy. So I think like those help, just working on personal projects, figuring out the subjects that you think could be related, which is usually technology related and art related, and that really helps. um, I think other than that, it's just a lot of it is just going online and sort of doing the research and seeing what the other people are doing and trying to replicate it. That's probably the best that you can do. I don't know if I'm missing any other part of your question in my answer though.
Are there any
Like you asked me something
specific
else.
career paths, for example, modeling or rigging? Are there like different categories like that?
Yeah, so the entire department sort of divides into a lot of different sub departments. So you have the post production department can divide into a lot of like look development stuff and a lot of animation stuff. And then you have, of course, pipeline as well. Pipeline is purely technical, so it's a very different kind of field. But essentially, in look development, you have a lot of jobs where you're designing things. So it can go anything from like concept work to modeling and sculpting. That's actually building all these characters in a 3D software, like actually building them out of clay, essentially. And then you have shading and rendering, which is building physically realistic shaders and lights and things like that, so something reacts realistically in a computer in the same way it would do in real life. um, so you have those jobs, and then in animation you have the stuff that I do, which is rigging, or like puppet making. And then you have animation, where you study locomotion and the science of animals and why they behave and act the way they do. And so you have a lot of different fields like that, and it sort of breaks up into a lot more sub departments, and I don't want to get too much into it, but essentially there's a place literally for everyone. So if you're passionate about filmmaking, or if you're passionate about game design, there's probably a space for you somewhere, whether you're super artistic or super technical or a little bit of both, or just want to tell a story. There's definitely a department for you.
Yeah. Yes. So the following, are some common questions that I ask all of my guests. So right now, what are you working on, both in your, career and your life? I think I saw a few pictures on your Instagram where you've started including or developing, or you have equipment which looks really, like a side with a helmet, and there's this huge cantilever beam with a camera or something. Yeah. So what are you working on?
So with the production stuff, unfortunately, I can never say what I'm working on because we have NDAs that prevent us from talking about it. And if you want to know the stuff I worked on, of course, like just check out my MDB page, or go to my Instagram account or whatever, and you'll see the stuff that I made before. But right now we have a lot of Netflix projects. We have a few films. There's a lot of really interesting stuff coming out, and I'm super excited. It's been a very busy year, so I'm very excited to share those once they're out. Uh, on my personal projects, I do a lot of personal projects. One of the benefits of the internet is essentially it gave me access to artists all over the world. So we have there's this artist platform called ArtStation, which is sort of this Instagram for artists essentially. So it's just purely for them. People are putting up their projects, and it's a great way to start getting connected with people. So I met a lot of really interesting artists through there. And right now we're working on a project where we're trying to an artist from Canada, she reached out to me to do this little animation of a lion, and so we sort of did a little tissue simulation sequence with that. And now we're sort of getting in a couple of guys I worked with in the UK on board on that project to add like fur and make it sort of look like what it would look like if it was on the Lion King movie. So
Mhm.
that's a personal project of mine that's going on. I'm very excited to see that one come to light, but it's sort of very early in its early stages right now. Um, yeah, with the helmet gear, I'm sort of working on using the iPhone. Like it has this really cool facial tracking system that they introduced at some point for their animojis, and
Mhm.
it's a really cute thing, but it has a lot of potential. So essentially what they've done is they've built this software that somehow studies using some machine learning, I guess. It somehow studies like what expression a person is making, and then transmits that out into data, and then you can essentially transfer that onto any different type of character and make them move the same way. And so they have introduced that for the animojis, and I'm just essentially trying to manipulate that data and use it for some of my filmmaking purposes. So I'm building a little HMC. I can see that on the ground there. So for anyone who doesn't know, that's just a head-mounted camera. So where you can just sort of mount the phone and be able to do sort of a live recording and put it back into an engine and capture the person's performance and see if we can do something interesting with that. We have a few internal projects at work as well that's sort of driven by that right now. So yeah, that's another one that's sort of going on. I always have a bunch of personal projects going on. So the best way to keep track of that is just like, I guess, like follow me on Instagram, or check out my ArtStation page, because that's where I'll post what I'm working on. So yeah, those are the ones. Those are the big ones that are going on right now.
Yeah, great. The facial tracking, does it involve those markers that people have on their face, or is this the one without uh, the markers?
So right now with ARKit, that's the sort of application that Apple built with their iPhones. I'm not entirely certain. I've gotten better results with markers. So the thing is, whether it's marker or markerless, how the application is doing it is basically doing a live track of expressions. So the way it's doing that is it's looking at a video sequence, adding track points to where it thinks the eyebrow is, where the eyelids are, where the lips are, or whatever, and then trying to track it. So the track points on your face is essentially just a way to make it easier for this thing
Okay.
to do the job, because it's looking at distinctive points on your face to kind of do the tracking. A lot of people have this misnomer that with the newer iPhones, like the 10 from the 10 on, they introduced that 3D projection technology for like the face unlocking, that it has something to do with it. But truthfully, it doesn't, because if you try to do this facial animation capture with the lights completely turned off, it does not know what to do, because it's
Okay.
not relying on those projections to get
Projection.
any data. It's actually relying just on tracker marks on your face to figure out like how you're animating, which is a very sneaky thing I think Apple did, because they did not introduce animojis to any of the older iPhones. Even though
Even though they could have,
I'm
I guess.
they could definitely have done it, and I'm sure they have a marketing team that chose to go about it that way. But regardless, it's a really cool piece of technology. I know Apple also recently bought one of the motion capture companies that did the same kind of motion capture, which is using a video reference to track what's happening and then output data of like saying, oh, this guy's left eyebrow is moving up now, he's blinking now, and then sort of use that data to drive their animojis and hopefully like more things in the future. So yeah, so that's how that works.
Uh, can you name some books that brought value to you?
Okay, so I definitely don't read. So I'm very certain I'm illiterate, but I have read honestly two books in my life, two novels in my life. I think one was Aragon when I was really young and I had chicken pox and I had nothing else to do. So I had to read a book. And I read that one then. And I read the following book after that. I think it's called Eldest right after. But those are the only two books I read in my life. But I think it's unfair to ask me this because I'm a filmmaker. So you should be probably asking me what movies would I suggest. So I
Yeah, go
would
ahead.
say I think yeah, I think with that I would say I think for me Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. I think that was a really great film for me to watch. I did like I had my parents got divorced when I was sort of in my preteen years, so I had most of my childhood was essentially weekends going between houses. You spend time with your dad doing this, and you spend time with your mom doing this, and all that, and the sort of drama and craziness that comes with that. And so with A Series of Unfortunate Events, just not to give too much away, it's a great film. I know there was a Netflix series made off of that. I don't know how good that is, but the movie is really nice. It's basically about these three children who get sort of orphaned, and they have an evil uncle that wants their money and is trying to find elaborate ways to kill them. And why I say it's a great film to watch is it makes you feel like you really get attached to the characters. So I think that's a great film to watch. I think there's Pan's Labyrinth. It's a Mexican film, a Spanish film by Guillermo del Toro. I think that's also a really great film in sort of a coming of age film, I guess in some ways as well. I think those two are pretty strong films to go by. And if you're more basic, as some people might say, I would say watch Star Wars.
Star
Star Wars
Wars.
is great. Star Wars is amazing.
You also work on have worked on some Star Trek, uh, I believe, right?
Yep. So
Uh,
we have a Netflix series called Star Trek Discovery. So we do a lot of work on that one. And there's another one called Star Trek Picard. So we've done that one as well. We do a lot of stuff. We're Ghost, the studio that I work for. We're a very space friendly studio. So we do a lot of space shows. We did Lost in Space and we did some of the Star Wars movies as well. So yeah, a lot of space stuff.
do you have a personal favorite of a fictional character or an animated character?
Oh, like from what I've done or what I like in general, what other people have done?
Yeah, both. Your personal
Both.
favorite.
Um, I really like, okay, with the personal one, I think it's an easier answer. We did this creature called Molly. She in the latest season of Star Trek Discovery, she comes in the first episode. She's this giant space slug, and she's violent and she eats a bunch of people, and there's like a lot of gore, and it's fun and exciting, and these idiot aliens just trying to fight laser beams at it, and it was such a fun thing to build. I loved it. So it was a great. That's one of my favorite creatures. I have a lot. It's honestly very hard for me to pick just one, but I think she was the most fun one to build. And I'm building another really interesting creature right now, so hopefully I can share it soon with everyone. But with something that other people have built, I think Gollum from Lord of the Rings is a very special character because it also pushed the technology forward. So I think it's a very interesting character. So I think it has a lot more symbolic meaning to me. But I don't know. But I'm not sure if it is my favorite character. So I'm just gonna give that answer for now. It's a bit of a thinker because I don't know. Do you have a favorite character from a movie? Maybe that will inspire me to give you an answer.
I think Yoda is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Especially because he talks very less, and there's more of.
Yeah. Yeah. Yoda is quite entertaining. Yeah, he's a really interesting character. there's just so many fantastic creatures. I mean, and if you sort of not just look at what's built in with computers and just what's actually built throughout throughout
Yeah,
filmmaking history, right? I think there's this in Pan's Labyrinth. There's this really creepy monster that sort of it's sort of like this devil goat thing that tells this little girl what she has to do in the underworld and all the tasks. And I think that's also a really interesting creature that was made in a time where they didn't really have amazing technology to build it. And a lot of creatures from Harry Potter. I think this. I'm sure people have differing opinions on Dobby, but spoiler alert: when Dobby does die, it is a very sad moment.
yeah,
Everyone is really crying. Even people who didn't like Dobby was crying. So I think yeah, that's also a very interesting creature. You get really attached to it. They
yeah.
found a way to make you feel connected to it, so that's also really great creature. Yeah.
What about in life? What values do you think in life are important? Maybe a bit philosophical, but
Ooh. I'm a very opinionated person, so I have a lot of things that I would like to say,
yeah,
probably, but
this is your episode.
I think I think you know I've had I was fortunate enough to have a lot of different kind of experiences in my life, and I was fortunate enough to leave home and go to travel to a lot of different places and meet a lot of different kinds of people at different circumstances in their life. I think one of the thing that I think the things that speak to me most is I think community. I think people fail a lot of times to provide back to the community because I think we've built a safe bubble for people to do whatever they want. And so that creates an environment where you can be a lot more selfish. So I think having giving back to your community is the most important thing. So that may be your friends, maybe your family, stay in touch with them, talk to them, check up on them, especially in a time like now. I think that's really important. So giving back to your community, I think is the most important thing in terms of purpose in life. So I think in a world where you're allowed to be selfish, to do what you want to do, I think it's important to remember that. So I think that's important. The other thing is I go by what Walt Disney said. I'm paraphrasing now because I can't really remember it. He said that you're only going to do something right if you love what you do and you're doing it the way you want to do it. And I think that's really important. And that speaks to me because when I was in school, I really did not love what I was doing. And in my formative years, because of the environment that maybe I was in, there weren't enough examples for me to learn this. That it's really important to find love in everything that you do, and you really can. And it's not really about being you have to be competitive in life, and you have to you have to join the rat race and do a good job, and you have to bring people up along with you, but it's really important to do that in a way that still makes you a happy and humble person, and that comes primarily from your everyday job being something that you really love and something that makes you happy. So you need to find that, and you need to be able to find happiness in sometimes doing the stuff that doesn't make you necessarily that happy. So that could be that's another really important thing. So if you're able to do that, I think you can do the stuff I was talking about before. I think you can do the community stuff much more easily because you're just going to be a cheerful, happy person. And honestly, I know that's a really hard thing to do when you're going through a pandemic and everyone has their own stress and all that stuff. Yeah, and you got just one life, so you got to live it doing something that makes you happy. So do that.
yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I think community
Yeah.
work is really important, and especially you mentioned having the ability to do whatever you want. It's always good to give back to community, and still have present those features and abilities to people who might not have. So yeah, that's really beautiful. uh, yeah, so this was really interesting. I and fun, catching up after a long time. uh,
Yeah, it's been a very long time, 9 years, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, very close to a decade.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, for taking your weekend and talking to us and sharing some of your perspectives. and talking about your work. Now I really look forward to seeing more of your characters and animation. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting. I wish I had stuff like this to watch when I was coming up. I think the more people we listen to, and sort of the more stories we hear, the more inspired we're going to be to do something. And so, a podcast like this really allows for that. And very often, the podcasts that are available out there is sort of for an international market. So to actually hear from people who sort of grew up in the same school as you or grew up in the same neighborhood as you and are doing really interesting stuff. There's so many interesting stories on your channel, and I'm so glad to be a part of that, and I'm so excited to hear more of those. So I hope this helps a lot of people, and it helps me. It's just not even now just to be educated in what someone else is doing. It's fascinating. So thanks for having me. I think you're doing a great job, and hopefully we can do more of these.
Yeah, my pleasure. I hope people do take out inspiring stories from here. And if they want to contact you, I'll leave links to your Instagram page and any or your email if you want.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yep.
All right, cheers, Nathan. Bye bye.
Bye
Thank you.
bye.